there's this thing with niggas that get curved by a babe and then they come back and talk about how she's a hoe that doesn't really get to me. Like, if she was a hoe, then she'd have probably given it to you, or she'd have probably told you to pay up, and maybe if you did, you'd have gotten some, right? Like, honestly, I never really get these guys, because, like, why bring down someone's name? Why tarnish their reputation to the public simply because you didn't get some? Because, well, I don't know, like, I've never really understood what drives people to start saying such shit, especially if they got curved. Because if you got curved, then that means that she isn't a hoe, if anything. But anyways, I will leave that to chance. I might discuss that a little bit later. In one of my many local languages, Karibuni to Break Time on Westside, your number one break time podcast, coming to you from Nairobi, Kenya. The man on the mic is Sir Denver B. The show is Tweetstreet, the show where we take a nice deep dive into Twitter. We go and pull up a couple of tweets and we break it down in the realest way possible. And I might as well just do that because we have a bunch of tweets. I'm not gonna lie. At some point, I almost thought that this episode wouldn't happen because I don't know. Ever since the beginning of the week, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, there's been a lot of political talk on Twitter. And people are going back and forth over the whole president and the deputy president and like the split in the party, blah, blah, blah. For those of y'all that are into politics, I'm not going any farther than this. So if you feel like turning off, I won't blame you. But if you're not into politics, this is where it kind of ends. So I think this is the part where now you can start tuning back into the type of shit that I talk about. Now, as usual, the tweets are still there. So yes, Tweetstreet is still happening. Now, to kick us off, there's this thing that people do with calling a lot. But anyways, let me just explain the tweet to you. Yo, my friend just got 125 missed calls from the girlfriend. I'm still shook. 125. How? And it's not like she's in danger. What do we call that? Well, there's actually a very simple term for that. It's called toxicity. Now, for those of y'all that don't know what toxicity is, I will even start by spelling it for you. Toxicity. Toxicity. Now, if you are toxic as a person, or at least if you do something a little too much, it becomes poisonous. We've all heard that saying, we've all heard that proverb. And if you are doing it too much as a person, then you won't necessarily be called poison per se, because now that's just insultive. What you will be called nowadays is toxic. Now, people have talked about toxic things time and time again, and they are true to a certain degree. So there's toxic feminism, there's toxic masculinity, and in this case, it's simply being a toxic girlfriend. Because, no word of a lie, as much as, yes, we enjoy communicating with you, as much as we probably love you as boyfriends, I must say it like a guy, sometimes we just do not want to hear your voice. We just do not want to hear your voices. Sometimes we just don't even want to feel your presence for a little bit. Sometimes we need a little bit of that cool breeze. We need a little bit of that fresh air, that space, so that we can be boys, so that we can do some of the shit that we enjoy doing. Because especially when it comes to dealing with your better half, obviously, as much as you might enjoy being with them, you want to be you as well. And sometimes, to some level, you might find that you don't necessarily do the same number of things. You can't do everything the same exact way when she's there versus when she's not there. So obviously, as a guy, you might want a little bit of that space. But when it gets to a stage where you're starting to call a fuck ton of times, because even on this same line of thread, there are other people commenting and talking about how they're getting 62 missed calls, 30 something missed calls, 20 something missed calls. And I'm sitting back and I'm like, who the hell has the time and the headspace to start calling you that many times? That's a little too much, if you ask me. Because the way I see it, if you want to reach someone and tell them something, if they don't pick up the call the first time, then maybe try the second time, but try it maybe a couple of minutes later. Probably they were busy with something, probably they were occupied, probably they couldn't even feel their phone. Maybe it's on vibrate and shit. Or maybe they left it in the charger and they were taking a dump. I don't know, I don't care. But if you are continuously calling them, it moves from the point of you trying to tell them something, or at least it moves from them wanting to pick up the phone and listen to you, to them just seeing your contact number, your contact name on like the call sign and everything, and they're like, fuck, now I'm being pestered again. And to be quite honest, it is the truth. We all do get tired of seeing and being with certain people at certain times, especially if you're an introvert, or especially if you're a bit more antisocial than others. Then you'll probably go through such. Like with the 2-call thing. I learned this actually from my homie Morike. Mad shout out to you, Morike, if you're listening to this. If you're trying to reach someone, don't go past 2 missed calls. And if you're even going to try going past that, the most that I'd probably say you do is just send a text. And I don't mean WhatsApp text, I don't mean a Telegram or a DM. Send a regular text. Because when I hit you up the first time and you don't pick, and then I hit you up the second time and you don't pick, by that point in time, if you see 2 missed calls, there's probably something that I really wanted to tell you, or there's something that I really wanted to find out. There was a close to urgent, but there was a pressing reason for me wanting to reach out. So if you don't call me back, then you clearly don't want to communicate, you clearly don't want to talk, so there's no need. If I added the message and it probably had a snippet, or it had a bit of information that I wanted, or it had some of the information that I was trying to pass, then it would give grounds for you to call back. But if you don't do none of that, then there's a pretty good idea that, you know what, probably they just don't want to talk to you. And even to add to that, considering that this is something that's happened to me, not even with a babe, with a nigga, a homie of mine, when you call a lot, or at least when you do that so many times, the value of your phone call reduces. And as much as people never really put value on this shit, it's actually something that happens on a subconscious level, because the value of someone who you hardly ever talk to calling is usually quite high, because you'll see them call you like, this person never calls. You'll almost always pick up. But if it's someone that calls you constantly, even when you don't want to be called, you'll see their phone number. Even though it's an emergency, you'll be like, this person's probably disturbing me. And no word of a lie, this is something that happens to me. I have a homie that hits me up on WhatsApp, then he'll call me, then he'll text, then call a bunch of times, and he usually pisses me off. And if he's listening, honestly, I don't give a shit. It's annoying as hell. Like, that's something that I might as well just tell everyone, including the same person that's doing this. So the way it is, you probably don't need to call that much. Call twice, then maybe text. But I don't see why calling more than 3 times really is something that people do. Anyways, that aside, on to the next tweet. Women always claim to love a big penis until it arrives. Then they just spend time running away from it on the bed. It's so annoying, but you can't relate, can you, Ant-Man? Okay, how would I put this? Minus the you can't relate, can you, Ant-Man bit. I will agree to this to some level. I once sat down with a bunch of babes and we were talking about just normal sex matters and shit, and at some point I made a joke about wanting, one of the largest dicks ever, getting 10-12 inches. And I actually listened to how they were talking about it, and they were like, no, this is too much. As much as we used to want a big dick, we've matured now, blah, blah, blah. But the thing is, they'd actually been getting some pretty good sized dick for a minute. And the point that came out was, yes, women claim to love big dicks, but it's sort of the same way guys will talk about wanting a chick with nice tits, a nice ass, super slim body, and a pretty face. Like, we talk about stuff that we want mostly because we're thirsty, or we want something which has some of those features, but in reality it's just because we're thirsty and or horny, or we just have certain desires that are not entirely reminiscent of something that we want in the long term. And the way I usually try to explain it is, you might want all of that, but in reality what it is that you actually want as a person might not even be that. You might even see the person and you're like, yes, fine, she's good, or he's fine, but it's too much, or I don't really think that I really wanted that. Like, I probably wanted something a little bit more. Because when it comes down to it, when you look at the reality of people and desires, the looks bit is only the first stage. That's just to get them past the first round of elimination. well, it might get them through 99.9% of the work if it's going to the bedroom and smashing. But when it comes down to a lot of these long-term relationships, dating, and other scenarios, it's usually just the first stage of the job. After that, that's when you find that, how they relate to people, their ability to have a conversation, what they have between their ears. That's when all of that comes into account. But the way I see it, most people are dreaming, they don't really want that. Anyways, next tweet. Oh, and this one's a pretty sad one. An 11-year-old child committed suicide on Mother's Day as a gift to his mom. He left a letter saying, "On today's special day, I want you to be the happiest ever. Every day you used to say that happiness left your life the day I was born. You told me Dad left us because of me, so today I want to change things. I want you to be happy and live as if I've never existed. You told me you'd never look at me with love, but I always loved you and admired you as the best mom on earth. I hope one day you will think of me. I hope in heaven you will finally hold me and kiss me. The best gift I could give you is living your life as you've always told me you wished I was never born. I love you, Mama. Happy Mother's Day." Those were his last words. The mother discovered his body with a letter and fled the scene right after, scared she'd be held responsible for her child's suicide. All I have to say is do not have kids if you're not going to love them and treat them properly. They didn't ask to be there. Do not make their lives hell on earth to the point where they have to take their own lives for your horrible actions. And to that I say, facts. Now, as sad as this tweet is, I also do need to bring out another point. Having a child does not mean that the nigga will stay with you. I just had to put that out there. Okay, on the child story, much as it looks like I was being insensitive and ignoring the main bits, is yes, if you are not ready to be a mother, if you're not ready to take care of someone, if you're not ready to ditch a lot of the things that you used to do while you were, childless and having fun with life, say in your 20s or even in your teens, because there's people that get kids in their teens, then by all means go have an abortion. I'm one person who's not very pro-life, and this is part of the reason why I can say I'm not pro-life, because the child didn't choose to come to this world. The fact that you chose to let them come to this world and you were not prepared to become a bigger person so that you can take care of that child is in and of itself a crime. And the worst bit is, for some of these people, they'll end up ditching their kids, move on with their lives, almost completely forget their children, and then they start becoming someone else's burden or a country's burden, or in a global perspective, in an entire species perspective, a civilization's problem. So by all means, if you're gonna get a kid, please make sure you're ready to have one. And like I repeated, this whole idea of trying to trap a nigga by getting pregnant, it works on some guys, but some niggas will always run away. Some of us just aren't ready to start dealing with children. Or for the case of people that are sleeping with a married man or someone who already has kids, they aren't ready to deal with more children. I'm not gonna start quoting Future on this, but well, Bible of misogyny isn't exactly on your side here as well. Anyways, that being said, I need to get to the last tweet, and this one's gonna be interesting. If a motherfucker stop fucking with you while you're going through something, never fuck with them again. This was a tweet that was written by a woman, by a lady. Actually, I'm not going to call it a lady, by a woman. And I don't even know how to put this out, but I'm gonna be straight up and honest with y'all. I don't agree to this. I honestly don't. If you're going through something, then there's a good chance that me ditching you, or actually not to say ditching, because ditching sounds a bit bad of a word, but me leaving you alone might be what's best for you. Like, I don't get why people usually talk about this and that, like, you should have been there for me. Sometimes you being left alone is actually a good thing. And I'm saying this as someone who also has things that he'll go through. Sometimes I just want to be alone. And when someone comes up and they're like, you weren't there for me, I'm like, sometimes, well, you probably do better alone than when there's other people. Sometimes when there's other people, they just delay the inevitable, or they delay the worst from happening. So I usually count that as, quite frankly, absolute bullshit. And not to belabor a point, but whenever it comes to shorties, whenever it comes to these women, they're almost always going through something. Actually, fuck the almost. They're always going through something. And considering that they're always going through something, then, well, I'm not saying you leave them alone all the time, but you pretty much just have to ask them, do you really want me here, or should I just give you some space? That's probably the most courteous way to put it. For me, I'm the type of person who's a little less courteous and be like, all right, you know what? If you are going through something, then I guess once you're done with it, we can go back to talking. Not because I don't care, not because I am heartless, but because sometimes you just need to deal with some things alone. If you say you genuinely need a friend and you ask me to be there, I might just rethink the whole thing, depending on the situation, of course. And at the end of it, when you look at some of the issues that we go through as people, most of them are better dealt with alone. Imagine if someone of the opposite sex was asking you to be with them or to be there for them in a sense, and they're going through something that has probably ruined their perception of dating and possibly, how would I look at it, being with someone from the opposite gender for something more than just the bare essentials. Or probably they have a sex addiction, probably they have attachment issues, and they're like, why can't you be there for me? How exactly do you help them? Helping them sometimes means you stepping back and saying, no, we're not taking it there. No, I'm not spending time with you. No, we're not going to chill together. It's a way of just telling them, you know what, you need to take a step back and start focusing on you and stop having me try to help you deal with a problem that's built for you. Because in reality, not everyone's problems are handled the same exact way. Just the same way I was talking about being pro-choice. Some cases, it's okay to have the baby. Some cases, it's a lot better to abort. And the world is even more complicated than that when it comes to different issues, especially mental ones. Sometimes it's just better if we just give you some space. Sometimes you need to learn more about yourself. Sometimes you need a psychiatrist or a psychologist. So I won't see why it is that people usually come up and they're like, if you weren't with me during that time, then I don't see why it is that you deserve to be with me at my best. It's usually bullshit. And a lot of times I've seen people, hell, maybe I've been one of those people. I spend time with someone, I'm there for someone during a very bad time. Take, for example, maybe I want to date this person, I really like them, and I'm like, you know what, I'll help you heal through this moment. And then you help them out, you spend time with them, you chill with them when they're crying over their boyfriends or past experiences or friends or some shit. They go through the ringer, they pretty much show you the worst, and you remain there for them. And then at some point, things get better. They improve, they grow, they become better people. Hell, they become sexier. They have that sex appeal, like they're confident in themselves, they're looking mighty fine. And then some other nigga comes through and then he starts hitting that. Tell me how you're gonna feel as a nigga. And when you're busy trying to get your shot, or like, you know what, can't we just be friends right now? Because I'm not looking at things going beyond this. I'm not really interested in having a thing with guys. Like, this is something that happens to guys a lot. And I did talk about friend zone and the simps and simping in the previous episode, or at least in this week's episode of Battle of the Sexes. You can go check that out. It's the episode right before this one. And I spoke about it. But just to say, sometimes we come and we help y'all, and then y'all end up friend zoning us, and then going to smash another nigga that probably never gave a shit. And he came when you were at your absolute best, and probably even ditched you when you're going through a lot of shit. So I don't know. The way I look at it, if you probably stopped thinking that everyone should be there for you when you're going through the ringer, then you'd probably understand that sometimes you have to deal with your shit yourself. Anyways, that's been it from me today on Tweetstreet. If you guys have any comments, criticisms, feedback, y'all know where you can hit me at. It is on the IG at Breaktime on Westside. If you want to hit me up on Twitter, it is at Bagaka. The D, the B, and the D are capital. I will see you guys later. Take care.